Stephen is the idealistic deputy campaign manager for Governor Mike Morris, who's on the verge of winning the Democratic nomination for president.
We have to do it. It's the right thing to do, and nothing bad happens when you're doing the right thing.
But just as the opposing candidate's campaign manager offers him a job, Stephen finds out a dirty secret that could ruin the governor.
What if I had something else?
Like what?
Something big.
At the risk of losing everything, Stephen must decide where his allegiances lie in the Ides of March.
Next up, we're talking about The Ides of March, a political thriller where we discover that politicians are corrupt. We've all just seen it. Sean, why don't you give us the quick and dirty?
This is a pretty entertaining, pretty thrilling movie about the corruption of politics and surrounding its mastermind of the campaign, played by Ryan Gosling, who really gets strung up in this web of deceit and immorality, and I think it's a very fascinating movie.
I think that The Ides of March is part of a long history of films that deal with presidential tawdriness and bad behavior. It gives us the tawdriness without giving us anything fresh or new, and without doing that, it just feels very cliche.
I really enjoyed this film, but I agree with you. I don't think there's much that's new about this story, but I just think it was really well executed. It was, in my eyes, perfectly paced. I had great performances, dialogue that just effortlessly flowed off the tongues of our actors.
Paul likes this.
The beauty of it is that everybody who's over the age of 18 or past the age of eligibility will be for it. Why not?
And all of the others
Can't vote.
But I do think that there are certain fresh elements to this movie. I think it brings it into a more modern setting. It updates it. It has shades of the 2008 election. It has shades of John Edwards. It has shades of the 24-hour news cycle with MSNBC and CNN. I wish it went into that a little bit more, but it still talks about those issues and still brings them up.
But what is the value of doing that? We all just lived through the 2008 elections. And the real story is probably more interesting and intriguing than this composite that Clooney put together here.
It followed a character that wasn't cut and dry. And this Ryan Gosling character, he's boy wonder. Everything goes right for him. He's age 30 and he's, like he says himself, he's more experienced than half the people that he's working with, and he's 10 years younger. And then you see really bad things happen to him, the decisions that he makes, which I feel were rationalized by the events that occur to him.
I can't do it.
You're on a sinking ship, Steve. Tell her what she wants to know and jump. Come over to our side. We can control this thing.
I agree that the political strategist, Stephen Myers, played by Ryan Gosling, was the way to go. And that's what I think would have been new and fresh about this particular story. The problem is that the writing lost sight of that and decided to go into what they thought was titillating and tawdry.
Well, speaking of Ryan Gosling, this is a terrific cast that George Clooney assembled for this movie. Not only Gosling, Clooney himself, you've got Philip Seymour Hoffman, you got Paul Giamatti, Marissa Tomei. It's a dream
I
cast.
can't imagine a better cast. I thought performances were really, really strong.
Looking at this stellar cast is one of the things that helps us get through these 2 hours. And then when you go in and the writing doesn't really substantiate this talent, to me, is just criminal. And then in looking at the development of the characters, I don't buy Stephen Myers' arc. He goes from being this idealist that you mentioned at the beginning to this petulant, bratty hypocrite. He fires other people. He reads them the riot act, but when he gets fired because of a mistake that he makes, he doesn't think that the rules apply to him. And he decides that his idealism turns to vengeance.
We've talked about Gosling a lot before, but I just think he is a terrific young talent. I think he brings it in this movie, maybe not as much as he did in Drive. I think people will notice him more for that.
Or Crazy Stupid Love.
Or Crazy Stupid Love, but I think he's terrific here. Part of the reason that I buy into it is I think that could be realistic. It could be if you can dish out, but you can't necessarily take. If your job is to fire people all the time, and then it comes right back at you and bites you and says, now you're fired, you might have a grudge against the people who did that, even if it's been your job that whole time.
I completely agree that that's a good arc. I just don't think that they executed it well.
Well, this film is directed by George Clooney.
Of course.
This is his 4th feature film, and I think he does a stellar job here. He takes a supporting role in this film. He casts a lot of great people around him and gives them each individual moments where they can really shine.
I think that he is perfectly serviceable as a director. I wish that he had paid a little more attention to staying away from cinematic or iconic cliches.
To me, it did remind me of a Sidney Lumet film in the sense of it being really clean and clear in terms of its through line, the structure supporting that through line. And so I really appreciated the directing in that way. It felt very classic.
So, as with the democratic process, I think it's time to go to the polls and take it to a vote. Let's take our tickets.
The Ides of March, for me, lives up to the hype, and I would recommend it to a friend, so I say see it.
Well, for me, The Ides of March demonstrates that Clooney is a competent director, but I just wish that he and the writers had brought a little wit, a little irony, and a fresh perspective to dirty politics. So I'm going to say skip it.
Wow. Well, it doesn't quite reach the Shakespearean depths that's suggested by its title, but I do think it's a tense political thriller, and I think it has a terrific cast. So I say see it.
I thank God for the democratic process, because your two see it's will now be modified by my skip it, which takes Ides of March to a stream it.
All right. I'll drink to that. Cheers. We'll say we're voting for the independent on this one.